So a quick introduction to me. I'm Marie McPherson and I'm the founder of The Grass Ceiling. And essentially, I'm an executive coach, and what I'm obsessed about is creating fulfilling opportunities for women, particularly in regional Australia. So you know how isolating it can be in a leadership role or in any kind of role where you work for yourself. There are things you can't necessarily share with anyone. You can feel very alone, and at times you fall out of love with your work. So what I do is create a safe space for exploration and growth so that you can move from stuck to soaring, and that you get to thrive with a renewed sense of purpose. We've got a myriad of possibilities in this hallway that we call our work life or our career, and there's so much room to explore. And what I like to do is open doors to rooms for you that you didn't even know existed. It's a beautiful process. It's lots of fun, and I get to work with some amazing people. So that's my day to day, and then I get to do fun things like this as well. So thanks again to all of you for joining. So that's me. Here's what you said in preparation for today's session, and I'm going to be looking at my notes as we go. Here's the things that you said you had never done because you tell yourself that you're not qualified, equipped, smart, brave enough to do them. So some people have said lots. I haven't applied for senior roles knowing that I do have the experience and the ability. Applying for a higher level or a more innovative job. One person said, what comes to mind is writing a book and to have it published by an established publishing house. I would love to do this. Someone else has said, put myself out there with my business. I don't know how to back myself because I feel I'm not what people are looking for when they're hiring my type of work. Another person has said, any ideas will be useful. Someone else has said, I need to back myself more. Proceed with a business idea and know that I can do it, but then the fear creeps back in. I know it would feel empowering and refreshing to do what I'd like to do and follow my dreams. Sometimes it's about not asking for the things that I need, such as flexible hours or working conditions. I'm not a great advocate for myself. To reduce self-doubt would be so powerful. Stepping into doing further qualifications, that's something else that people might not have tried. And creating an online course, even though I'm an experienced facilitator. And someone else has said, nothing. There's nothing that I've never done because I didn't think I could, which is pretty amazing. Maybe they should be running the webinar. Alison, it says there's 2 more people in the waiting room. Does that mean I need to let them in at the moment?
Yes, please. If you just go to the top.
I'll say admit all.
That's it.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Here we go. So we'll wait till they are in, and it looks like they are connecting. Good. Okay. So I'm going to now start sharing my screen with you. Let me go to my slides. Can everyone see that? Alison, can you give me the thumbs up that you can see it? Beautiful. It's working for you. Fantastic. So I'll be reading from my notes while we go, and I hope I don't need to admit anybody else in while I'm looking away from the screen. Let's see how we go. So thank you so much for all of those answers and reflections that you sent in advance of tonight. That's been really helpful. It's great information for me and a wonderful segue into what we're going to cover tonight. My plan is to take you through these slides now, and there'll be a few moments for you to have some personal reflections on a couple of questions, and then maybe share some thoughts. We might unmute some people, or we might use the chat function. We'll see how we go. Then I'm going to offer you a series of reframing questions that you can use to be curious and to help you stop judging yourself. And then what I'll do is let you know what will be available to you after the session. So for your participation, there's some gifts that I'm going to send to you. And then we'll have some time at the end, fingers crossed, maybe 5 minutes or so, for any questions that might arise. Does that sound okay? Is that what we're thinking we would do? I can't see everyone's nods, but I can see some. Fabulous. So, hands up, or give me a wave, or let me know thumbs up if you've ever decided not to apply for a job or to take something on because you've talked yourself out of it. Definitely I have. You've thought, I'm not qualified enough, I'm not ready, they won't see me as the right fit, and so on. Most of us have been in that position, haven't we? So I'm going to share with you a story about a former coaching client of mine. She told me about a one-to-one conversation she had with her manager. She'd been reflecting upon how long she'd been in the organisation and what she was doing, the work that was a bit above her pay scale, and how she was excited about some of the changes that were occurring at work. Her manager then said, I have a role in mind that I'm going to restructure. It's going to be at the team leader level, and it includes much of the work that you're doing now. I'd like to show you the revised PD, and I'd like you to express interest. What do you imagine she might have said? Maybe if some people could pop some things in chat, what do you reckon she might have said to that offer? What have we got? We've got, thank you, I'll have a look. Sounds great. What else might she have said? I'm not ready. Let me think about it. I'm not qualified enough. Yeah. Any other thoughts? I don't think I could do it. Yeah. Do you think I'm suitable? Oh, that's a good one. I don't really know if I'm up for that. Yeah. Good stuff. Thank you, everyone. And by all means, keep the chat coming. So you're right. She went straight into a dialogue about how it sounded like the role was at a much more senior level, how she didn't think she had the right qualifications, so it may not be right for her. And she didn't think she could make the move right now. She went from denial to justification and so on. She said her manager's face changed and he looked completely stunned. And she said to me, in that moment, I think I lost the moment completely and shot myself in the foot. Does that sound familiar? We've probably all done that at some point in our life, haven't we? Then there's another client of mine who saw a job advertised that had her name written all over it. It was almost the position description sent from heaven. She decided she wouldn't apply because there'd be other people more qualified to do the role and that they would blitz the application process. And she was then, I can almost not say this, she was then invited by the hiring organisation to be on their interview panel because of her skills and experience and her knowledge. Did she kick herself? You betcha, especially when she sat on that interview panel and saw the calibre of applicants were on her level, or perhaps that she was even more qualified and more ready. So what is going on here? Well, most of us from time to time have some self-defeating thoughts, emotions, and actions. And it's referred to as the cognitive triad, where we repeatedly emphasize a negative view of ourselves, a negative view of the world and its limits for us, and a negative view of the future opportunities that we might have. And the good news is that you can change that cognitive triad to a more positive view. You can do what's called a cognitive reframe, and we will explore that shortly. So, what kinds of feelings stop us Is it always conscious? Is it sometimes so deep that we're not even aware? So I imagine that you've heard of unconscious bias. How would you describe it? Maybe we can unmute some people and actually have a bit of a chat about this. So I'm going to have a look at the gallery for a second, and I'm going to go to maybe, I'm going to try Jess. Can I unmute you, Jess, for a second? How would you describe unconscious bias, Jess Meaver?
Yeah, I would describe unconscious bias as, I shouldn't use the word biases in my description of it, should I? But I think unconscious bias, when you have a negative or a response to something, oh, sorry, my brain's fried. I've just returned from mat leave, Marie. I've had a full day of craziness. Yeah, I think when you think of when your pre-existing knowledge and personal experiences influence your approaches to things.
Yeah.
So yeah, your pre-existing things influence things forward. And I think the unconscious part of it is, you know, you're not aware of it, it's not intentional, it's not a deliberate act, but your past experiences have an impact of how you address situations unknowingly.
Thanks, Jess. Thank you. That was really cruel of me at this hour of the day, wasn't it? So I'm going to mute you again. Thank you so much. And Leah is holding up her applause sign because she's your big sister and she's allowed. Karen, you're making eye contact with me, which may not be deliberate, but I'm going to unmute you. Would you add anything? Let me unmute you.
Is it working?
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
I can hear you. Would you add anything to what Jess said?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking it's your preconceived ideas in your head that you may not even be aware you're making as well. So
yeah, nice one. Love both those answers. That's great. So let's have a look at what it means. So our unconscious bias is a bias that we are unaware of, as you said. It may happen outside of our own control. It happens automatically, and we all have several biases that we're unconscious of. And in the late 1990s, psychologists Banerjee and Greenwald explored hidden biases that we all carry from our lifetimes of experience. You may have heard of them. They talked about attitudes about age, gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, disability, and other factors. And Banerjee and Greenwald used the implicit association test, which you might have heard about, to establish the hidden biases of their subjects. They wrote about it in their 2013 book called Blind Spot. It's a great book. So the test was designed to detect the hidden contents of the mind, and its original application was to explore group-based preferences, stereotype, and identities that may not be accessible to our conscious awareness. But since then, it's been used to study preferences, beliefs, identity, and it's found applications in the domains of health, education, business, government, the law, and law enforcement. And it's currently used in 39 different countries and in 25 languages. I think the blind spot work is fascinating, and I want to take it a step further as to how it applies to us in our day-to-day life now. We know that we all have unconscious biases, and our traditional focus has been on where we are biased towards others. But I reckon we also have our own unconscious biases towards ourselves. It's not quite the same as imposter syndrome. That tends to be something that we are conscious of. This is much more insidious. We don't even know that we're doing this to ourselves. So let's use our chat box again. I'd like you to take a moment to reflect for yourself and then maybe type into the chat box, what are some negative stories that you tell yourself about you? What are the negatives that you are always looking for in yourself and that you see? Okay, so until recently, too young for a particular role. It's not the right time. Not good enough. What else? Not beautiful enough. Wow. Oh, Karen, I need to rub my heart. Not established enough. By nature, I'm a perfectionist. I've had to work very hard to overcome that. It's still something I have to watch out for. Not enough time, unable to balance family commitments with full-time work. That may be a reality, Annalise. That's a tough one. Yeah, some people might not like me. Yeah. There's a fair chance, Jess, isn't there, that 50% of the people you meet may not like you, which may have nothing to do with you. Absolutely. What are some others that we say to ourselves? You've all gone silent. Not enough experience. Yeah. I have to work hard all the time. That's a good one. Not the right time. Yeah. Someone else is better. I'm not worthy. Jenny, you're going to love my new book. What if I fail? They're tough, aren't they? They're horrible, these things we tell ourselves. We wouldn't speak to our children in this way. I have to meet everybody else's expectations. Yep. Not sure I want this. So sometimes they're good questions, aren't they? Sometimes our negative self-talk is actually quite rational and it's not always negative, but some of it is so pervasive and we get stuck. We get absolutely stuck on message. So there is something else. There's another factor that gets in our way and stops us from backing ourselves, and it affects our confidence. It's about the stories that we tell ourselves. We can be so negative about our own ability and we undermine our own confidence. It's not the whole story. It doesn't explain everything. There are so many structures within society that feed that. However, it's undeniable that we do this to ourselves to some degree. So let's look at how. Let's have a quick look at the reticular activating system. Now, I know that's a long sentence. Let's have a look at the RAS. Has anybody heard of it before? Just a quick wave. I can't see everyone, but if maybe a thumbs up if you've heard of it. Some of you will have. Let me just have a look at the gallery. Yeah, probably a couple. So let me explain it. You'll get it as soon as I describe it. So have you ever been driving along, hungry, really hungry, and daydreaming about a burger and fries? Just because you're so hungry, you start to think about junk food. You've got this terrible urge to pull over at the nearest stop and you really want to buy yourself something healthy. You keep saying, I'm going to stop when I come to a roadside place where there's healthy food. And as soon as you choose that thought, it seems as if every single stop has got a Macca's or a Hungry Jack's. It doesn't matter what you do, they are everywhere. You haven't noticed them before, but there they are. Now, maybe that's clever advertising and positioning and a bit of market saturation, but it's definitely how our RAS works. It's seeing the things that you're looking for subconsciously. Another example might be when you decide to buy a new car and you haven't seen very many of them around. And as soon as you make the decision that it's going to be a red Honda Civic, every second car on the road is a red Honda Civic. Do you know what I mean? Has that happened to you? You just see them everywhere. And it's not that there are more of them than there were yesterday. It's just that you are subconsciously looking for that particular vehicle because it's in your mind. You're not conscious that you're seeing more of them. It's just that that's happening. Pram models when you're pregnant, says Leah. There are many hundreds of examples I know that you will have come up with. So here's the thing. we spend a lot of time in our minds creating our own future pictures. 1 second, I'm going to mute while I have a drink. My apologies.
Let me know if you need me to jump in, Marie. Leah and I can have a bit of a chat.
So thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. For those of you who aren't aware, this webinar series is one that has been going on since about June and will continue to go on for the next couple of months. If there's any webinars that you have missed in our series, they are available on our website, and we'll be sending you the link in the coming days along with Marie's gifts and the slides from tonight, so you're able to watch any of the past webinars. We do have a couple more coming up, which I'll just see if Marie's right to join us yet. We do have a couple more webinars coming up. There is one next week at the same time, and that one is with Dylan from Tower Tax, and that's looking at the topic of business foundation and startups. Are you okay, Marie?
I am. I'm back. My apologies.
Fantastic.
That has never happened to me, but you know, here is a really good example of making things work in action, live in the moment. And you can imagine what my Raz was doing right then. Gosh, they're going to hate this. What a flop. But I'm back. We're good. So I think we were up to the bit, which is we spend a lot of time in our minds creating our own future pictures. And in this process, we bring forth thoughts, feelings, beliefs, values, dreams, and quite importantly, memories of past encounters or previous actions. And that tends to feed this bias awareness. Now, we do all of this irrespective of our conscious awareness, because the RAS is located in the core of our brainstem, and it takes its instructions from our conscious mind and passes them to the subconscious. So it's a very powerful little thing. And as a consequence of this biological function, whatever we are focusing on will percolate down into the subconscious. Is that making sense for people that I can see? Yeah, I can see some people nodding. So it's then going to appear at a future time, usually when it's least useful. So when we look for the things that aren't working in our lives, or the jobs that we're not getting, or that we can't make a change, or that we're preparing to go off to study, our RAS is tuned in to look for all the things that support the negative thinking that we've been feeding ourselves with. So let's have a quick discussion or chat about how you might alter your self-talk. What might be a way to retune your RAS? I'm going to see if I can unmute a couple of people. Annalise, I'm going to go to you. Is that okay?
That's fine. I was just writing in the chat box. Thank you, and glad you're feeling better too. Definitely not thinking it's a flop. I was thinking professional journaling. It's something I've been doing a little bit more of, and that's been really helpful to then look back on themes of things that I'm writing down. So that's one thing I would suggest.
I love that. I love that. That's fabulous. Thank you so much. If you could mute yourself, I'm going to quickly go to Jenny. I'm unmuting you, Jenny, without your permission. Is there something you've thought of? I think I've unmuted you, or is it not working?
Oh, here, I'll do that.
There we go.
I think going back to what you said before, just that practicing gratitude and stuff, but also at the minute for me, I've been writing a book for the last probably 5 or 6 months. So for me to put those thoughts out of my head and onto paper, has been a journey of self-discovery. So yeah, I agree with the journaling bit. I was a bit like, it took me a long time to actually connect the book with the journaling and how, important journaling is. But I journal every day.
Nice.
Because
nice.
I know how important it is.
That's great, Jenny. Thank you. I might see if Katya, have you got anything that you're thinking about in terms of how you might alter the self-talk?
I think something for me that works really well is the whole thing that's already been spoken about, which is gratitude.
Yeah.
And then also sometimes what works as well is, I'm in the service industry, and sometimes just reading through testimonials and reviews and things like that you've gotten from people that you've worked with, kind of makes you, like you try to do what you need to do, but then you kind of read it from somebody else's perspective and you think, oh, well, I didn't realize that was the impact I was having on that particular person's life or something like that. So sometimes, having conversations about those testimonials or reviews with somebody else. I often just chat to my husband. Like if I get a review coming, I'll talk to him about it, so that you kind of bounce off ideas. So yes, so having a chat about reviews and gratitude.
I love that. That's wonderful. So you actually check to ensure that, there might be some negative self-talk going on, but you're countering that with some other evidence, which is beautiful and feeds right into where we're going with this session. I'm quickly going to have a look at the chat box. Zakia's saying
that's
got
right.
Nothing to lose. Acknowledge and call myself out on it. Yeah, positive self-talk. Give it a name and talk back to it. Yeah, I can hear you doing that, Leah. That's fantastic. I love it. Fabulous. Some great suggestions there. Also ask myself, what's the worst that could happen? Often my fear of what might happen is greater than the reality. So true. So true. Thank you, everyone. They're great suggestions. Thank you so much. So let's have a look at how we might reframe. What do we think about reframing the future? So just so that you know, these slides are going to be added to your post-session information pack. So don't feel like you need to hurry and scribble everything down as I'm speaking. There's no need to rush. You're going to get a copy of this. So here's a reframing exercise that you can actually use. Let's have a look. So first up, what assumptions am I making or potentially making about myself and my circumstances? And second, what is valuable and useful about this assumption? What's unhelpful about the assumption? And we can always find lots of unhelpful things about the assumptions that we're making. Is there any evidence that goes against the assumption? And how else could I interpret this? What else could this possibly mean? If you had to look at that list of questions, what would be your favourite? What's the one that has the most meaning for you? Let's use the chat. Yeah, valuable and useful, says Annalise. Any others? Yeah. What's valuable, what's useful, what's unhelpful? Great. It's a really good ground truthing process to go through, to actually check in with yourself. well, you know, I've got this negative view. I continue to talk to myself in this manner. But, you know, maybe is it true? You know, who else can I test this with? A bit like Karcher's suggestion. So what's the unhelpful and evidence against? Thank you, Karen. Zacchaeus says, look from a different angle, the last one. And Jess is having to go and feed a baby, which, of course, we need you to be able to do, Jess. Thank you for letting us know. So that's a bit of a cognitive reframe that we talked about in the very beginning. That's a simple thing that you can do for yourself, along with the other fabulous suggestions that you've all made in the chat box and through the conversation this afternoon. And it's really about making sure that you can test the evidence and give yourself a bit of a check. You know, that when the negative self-talk is happening and when you are noticing that you are looking for the negatives, you can flip it around. It's a little bit like going from impossible to splitting the word and saying, I'm possible. It's a little bit like a cheeky, quick cognitive reframe. Make yourself a list potentially of all the things you're saying that are negative, the I can'ts, the I'm not readies, the, you know, all the negative statements. Draw a line down the center next to them and then write the complete opposite. Even if you don't believe it's true, the power of seeing those opposite perspectives can be really earth-shattering. And I only say that to you because I've tried it for myself on numerous occasions, and I know the power of reframing our language, using different words, talking to ourselves differently. A great example is a conversation that I had with some people just recently about you know, how we speak to ourselves versus how we speak to our children. And in today's Growth Note blog, for any of you that are followers of my blogs, there's a story in today's blog about my little puppy, Maggie, learning to go for walks on the lead, and some stuff that happened that frightened her. And I'm comparing that to our experience of this current situation now with COVID, where, you know, we continue to tell ourselves that we're not equipped, we're not ready, we're no good at homeschooling our kids. There's a list of things, you know, 15 feet long about all the stuff that we can't do. And I think it's really important that we would not speak to children and young people in that way. And I often say to my coaching clients, have you heard what you're saying to yourself right now? Have you heard the language that you're using? I'll repeat back to you the sort of stuff that you're saying to me about you. Now, would you speak to the 4-year-old version of yourself that way? It's a very powerful reframe when you realize that, you know, you take that gasp and think, I would never speak to my own kids that way. I would never speak to a 4-year-old version of myself that way. Why am I doing it to myself now? So let's use reframing to change that negative self-talk. Thanks, Leah. Thank you for the compliment about today's Growth Note. So I'm conscious that we're starting to eat away at our time and we are finishing at 6:30. So what I'm planning to do is open this up for conversation and questions, because I think the most important thing we can do is support each other and share some knowledge. So we've had our little cognitive reframe list, and I'd like to let you know what I'm going to be sending out in your post-discussion pack from today. So first up, you're going to get a PDF copy of the slides that I've used tonight. There's also going to be a resources list, which includes some books and articles to read, a couple of TED Talks that I think you might like to watch, and there might even be some stuff to listen to. I'm not entirely sure, but there's a list of resources that's quite detailed that you might enjoy. You're also going to receive a free chapter from my book, Cutting Through the Glass Ceiling. And the chapter that you're receiving is chapter 6, which deals with all of the content that we've talked about tonight, that I have glossed over really quickly, but it goes into a bit more detail in the book. And you're going to be offered the opportunity for a free subscription to the Growth Note newsletter. So if you are so inclined to subscribe, there'll be details of how you can do that and hopefully that'll be nice and easy and you can click and go straight through. There's one other thing that I'm going to offer you which isn't shown on this slide, and it's an extra special that I've decided to offer just tonight. I'm developing an online e-learning course which comes from the book. So it's going to be almost like doing a mini read, and you get to do the exercises and basically online learn from the book itself. That e-learning course is due to be released in September, and I'm going to send you a 20% discount voucher so that you can actually pre-order and have a discount on that course before anybody else gets access to it. So that's just a little bonus for everyone who's attending tonight and who registered and will receive the recording. So what I'm going to do is flick out of my slides and get out of that screen. There's just an end slide on how you can contact me, which you'll also receive. Now let me go out of here and go back to stopping share. And here we all are. I can see everyone again. Okay. So I'm going to open it up now for any questions that people might have, or observations or comments, things that have occurred to you during the presentation. So maybe give me a wave or use the signal here in reactions, and I'll come to you and unmute you. Let's have a chat. Katja, yes, please. I'll mute you.
Okay, I'll get it started. So just a testimonial, I guess, for yourself. I did get your book, and I have read the book, and I've used it, particularly the chapter that you spoke about tonight around unconscious bias and the RAS and all of that type of thing. And I used that in a financial literacy presentation that I was invited to do for a group of African migrant women going through a leadership program. And so, you know, because I think the whole thing with unconscious bias, I mean, this type of thing you can use in your work, in the business sector, but also very much so in community sectors as well. And obviously when working with communities from different backgrounds and things like that, there's a lot of unconscious bias around their perceptions of what Australia is, their perception about how migrants are treated, their perception about what they can do here, or, you know, like feeling quite hopeless, and then just trying to change that around. So I found your chapter in the book quite useful in having those conversations with them. So that was really good. And the other thing around reframing the assumptions that we make with ourselves, I think something that I found quite useful with that is learning. So if I find that I started a business without any knowledge around how businesses work, and so my assumption was I can't make a success of this because I don't have any business knowledge. So my way of turning that around was go and learn, you know, learn something about it. Or if I'm working in the audiology field, and my assumption was, well, I can't do certain things because I haven't had as much experience with it. Get somebody in and I got trained up, you know. So the whole thing around, I think for me, the big thing is around learning and just being open to learning instead of kind of allowing the assumptions to stop me. I kind of look at learning as a way to counter that.
Thank you, Katja. That's fabulous, and a really great example of how we can shift our thinking, actually do that cognitive reframe and flip things in our minds so that we have that contrast, we have that ground truthing. That's wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to go and see if Shana has got any comments. I haven't spoken to you yet, Shana. Is there anything that you are thinking about that has occurred to you while you've been listening?
I think for me, what resonates is the conversations around somebody else being more equipped, more ready for the role, and engaging other people, and especially people that work around you and with you, and even people who don't. I take, sometimes my son who's 17 doing year 11, and I'll say something, he looks at me and goes, "Mum, you could do that with your eyes shut." And sometimes it's people outside of that immediate square that go, you know what, you can do this, and engaging and having their thoughts. So I think those sorts of engaging those sorts of people, but also looking at that unconscious bias around how much of that is actually shaped from past experience, and how much weight do we put on past experience opposed to looking at the dreams ahead. And I think back to, teenage years and going through uni and the world's your oyster and all of this is about to do, and you did anything because it was possible, not because it was laid out and it was a certainty. And I think, especially in these times, there's some challenges with actually making that jump.
Yeah, indeed. That's really insightful. It's interesting, when I run my full day workshops for women on this topic, and a few other topics, we don't just spend this amount of time. And I have done a couple of those for Latrobe City. I always start those workshops by asking women to pair up and stand up and have a conversation about what they can recall it feels like when you thought anything was possible. So it takes people back to that time when, they've put themselves in a position where, the world's my oyster. I can do anything I want to. And we've all of us have felt like that at least once in our lives. And we get people talking, and then I can't shut them up. So it's usually a pretty great introduction to a workshop because they can't stop chatting. And we get people to change chatting partners 3 times. So it's a bit like speed dating on steroids. And then people come back, and we start the workshop, and we start the work. And there's this buzz in the room. You can just feel the energy pouring off. And so many people sit back and say, I'd forgotten what that felt like. I've been telling myself I can't for so long that I'd forgotten the energy that comes from just, that sense of remembering. So in that sense, I could walk out of the room and say my job is done in those 10 minutes because people are set alight again. And then the idea is I give them the tools for how to maintain that and take one step. So a little bit like tonight's conversation, we're glossing over some really deep theory and some big topics in a very short space of time. The idea is to whet your appetite and get you thinking about these things so that you might delve a little bit deeper and get in touch with what it feels like to think that things are possible. Given that we're living in a very strange world at the moment, that it's even tougher to think that way, and some of us are facing some really difficult times, it's also worth knowing that this time will pass. It may feel like it won't right now, but it will. And it's about, how do I prepare myself for what might be ahead at the end of that time, when we all go back to whatever normal is going to look like. And maybe we'll stop using the word normal. That might be a good idea. Zakia, am I able to throw to you? Is there any observation that you might like to throw into the mix, if you can unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And it's so lovely to hear your voice.
Likewise, I absolutely admire and love your work. I read your book, as you know, and very inspiring. I would like to actually ask you a question, if that's okay, because there is a challenge that is playing on my mind that I find difficult. I speak sometimes with quite senior leaders by title that I find lack compassion, and it sometimes feels like you're talking to a wall. So how do you find ways to get a real conversation with people like that, where you know, you have the gratitude, you've got that positive talk going, you're approaching it from the right perspective, but it feels like you're talking to a wall.
What a great question, Zakia. And knowing some of the work that you have done. So for everyone else who's listening in, Zakia works in a very big organization, which we won't name because this is being recorded, but a huge organization. And we met through a Women on Boards board mentoring program, and Zakia and her team interviewed me as part of that process. So some years ago now, and it's so nice to reconnect. I think the best way I can address that question is to suggest that it may not actually be about biases or anything that's unconscious or anything that you're doing that's negative or wrong. I think this is actually about a values clash, where what you value and what you hold dear and what's important to you might be different to someone else. And I think when people are hard to get to know or have created some barriers around themselves because of their seniority and they think they need to behave in a certain way, that's really sad. You know, I feel sad that people in leadership roles surround themselves or corral themselves in a particular way, or feel that they can't be more vulnerable or more authentic. And, you know, some of them might actually be authentically like walls. I'm sure there are a few, and so be it. But I think most of us are more human than that. And it's a real treat when we get to see that humanity in action. And when we meet people or work with people who feel like they can't open up those barriers, it's really difficult. So I imagine what's happening for you is a clash of value. You want to see more authenticity. You want to see more vulnerability. You want to be able to see empathy within that individual, and that's not what you're seeing. So I don't have any glib or clever answers to how you get around that, other than to remain curious. Sometimes it's about getting to know them better and finding one thing that is going to flick the switch. I remember giving a presentation to a group once where I felt like someone was completely disengaged and hated me. Talk about my RAS going over time. I thought this person just hates me. They just loathe me. I am flicking all their wrong buttons. And in morning tea break, we got into a conversation about something where we had a shared passion. And this woman said to me, "Oh, wow, you're interested in that. Oh," and I couldn't stop her talking. And then for the rest of the day, she was my biggest fan. So it was just that one thing to connect on that shifted the dial on that whole discussion. But I could have spent the day thinking, she loathes me. I'm going to start biting my fingernails and give up. So sometimes I think, Zakia, it's about recognizing what is it about this individual person that I might be able to connect with. And it's also about not being so tough on yourself. Here's the negative self-talk again, that, you know, we're not going to connect with everyone we meet. There's going to be a percentage of people where it just doesn't work. And it's about not sweating that and not beating yourself up that I didn't crack that hard nut. Does that help? Is that useful?
It's absolutely useful. And actually, I've been thinking about the clash of values and how that very much may be the reason why we are not connecting in a way that I would expect to connect.
Yeah.
Very useful, Marie. Thank you.
Pleasure. Great question.
Actually, I was just going to add to that, to Marie, because
Yes.
even in my workplace, I've seen that before, you know, where management will say, "Oh, you know, how can we get to know our people more?" And a team leader said to me, "Oh, what do you think? What can we do?" And I said, and he said, "Oh, you know, I don't know if me and the other team leader think it's a good idea and whatever." And I said, "Well, you know what?" I said, "Why don't you do a walk and talk around the building outside for 10, 15 minutes, because it's the best way that you will get to know your people in your team." And that started, and it continues today in a different format because we can't do the one-on-one stuff anymore, but certainly it's gone down to that team level where we're all engaged, and and it really does work. And so I'll just add that.
Yeah, that's great. Great point, Jenny. So often when leaders ask people, you know, how do we get to know our team better? The best response is, well, you could go and talk to them. You could ask them questions. You know, how often we think, and you know, I've been the CEO of a couple of organisations, and I've got to say, there are times when I have forgotten the real basics and wondered, you know, what might be going on in people's minds, and laying awake at night, you know, got up at 4 a.m. and paced around my apartment in the city. What might be going on for people? Oh, you know, you could ask them. You could actually go to work tomorrow and ask them some questions and find out, and be vulnerable and talk about what you're feeling. Because, you know, otherwise there might be that sense of she doesn't really want to know what we think, or, you know, she is the boss. We're at risk here if we say what we really think. You've got to actually create the safety to enable that to happen. So we've gone right off topic there, but that's fine. That's absolutely fine. What a rich conversation. Alison, I know that it's 6:30. I'm more than happy to spend another 5 minutes chatting or answering questions. I'm also really conscious that some people might need to go to feed kids or do whatever happens at this hour of the night. But if there are other questions or things people would like to throw in, I'm happy to stay for a bit longer. So
can I just give a shout out to Shana's comment before, because it's certainly become something that I'm more acutely aware. Teenagers are an absolute gift when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I know I'm pretty fortunate in my space, but
yeah, you cooked a good one, Kelly.
Oh, it's almost that, you know, cut straight to it. They're bold, they're brave, they've got that view to the future, and they can just stop it in its tracks, be immediately reflective and emotively responsive. And it's just wonderful. They're great. So yeah, I agree with Shana on that one.
It's great, isn't it? It's great when, and I'm not a parent, so I don't have the experience of kids telling me, you know, you can do anything. But I have an array of nieces and nephews, and now I'm so old, I've got great nieces and nephews who will send little messages. They use a whole lot of platforms that I've never heard of, which is a bit scary. I'm not going to do TikTok with them. But I've had to learn to use a whole lot of new technology to stay in communication with them. And you know, I just love their positivity. I love the messages that they send. And of course, there are times when they're not feeling positive. And so much of that is dependent upon the doom scrolling that they might be doing on the socials, or it might also be what they see in the adults who care about them. So, you know, this isn't just important for us as Leah has to go and wrangle kids. Good night, good luck, break a leg. This is important for us and our own mental health, and to, you know, be good role models to young people who are watching what we do. And not just our own kids. We don't realise the impact that we have on so many young people around. So it's a really important time for us to be mindful of retuning our RAS and being positive towards ourselves, because we want young people to see that example. Any last questions or comments or observations? What's been the best thing about tonight's presentation, your takeaway?
I'd love to say that the questions for challenging or reframing the RAS, because I often know you're going down that spiral of negative thinking, and it's like, well, how do I get out of it? And those questions are very specific to prompt answers to challenge those views. So thank you for those.
Yes, that's exactly what they're designed for, Annalise. It's about curiosity and appreciative inquiry, and they're written in such a way that they will trick your brain. So there's a bit of right brain, left brain trickery and science behind the structure of the questions, and it's designed to absolutely get you thinking about the opposite. So I hope they're useful.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I love appreciative inquiry.
It's lovely, isn't it?
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Any other last minute takeaways or thoughts? Love to hear your thoughts before we go.
I'm going to be a bit cheeky.
Yes, you are, Lacey.
I obviously have the opportunity to learn from you a lot, but I was curious in terms of the unconscious bias. Is there a way that you can sort of check in with yourself regularly that you would suggest, or is it just simply it sort of comes to mind and you think, oh, I'm going to catch that thought and do the opposite and talk to myself? And if you see it in someone else that you know very well, is it our job to tell them as well?
I should be careful how I answer that question, because I can feel some heat and pressure coming up.
Oh, not at all. I was just curious. I guess I'm just trying to think about ways of stopping it happening, I guess, like checking in with yourself.
So to answer the second part of your question first, one thing you can do with people that you care about where you hear it frequently is to stop them and say, is that really true? So, you know, it can be a simple question, which is about getting them to sort of bump into it headlong.
Yep.
And I would suggest we can do that with ourselves. It's not as easy because we don't recognize it as easily because this is so unconscious. So I think sometimes writing down some of the things that we say to ourselves that are negative brings them to the consciousness. And then as the RAS starts to look for them more, you'll start to see them, and then you can say to yourself, hang on a minute, is that the truth?
Yep.
You can have a bit of fun with it. If it's with a friend or a family member, you can actually say, well, now that's a little dramatic. Every time you try something, it fails. Is it really every time? Like, really? You can actually have some fun with it and be a bit playful so that it's not so confronting. And you can do that with yourself as well, which makes it a little bit more lighthearted. So if you tend to go completely overboard with, you know, everything I've ever worked on falls apart. Every time I try to knit a jumper, I end up unraveling it. Every time? Really? Every time? So there's some cute little tricks that you can play. You can use the reframing questions or versions of, and sometimes it's actually, some of my clients have a thing where they bite their tongue, you know, so they have the negative thought and they're like, okay, just stop that, stop speaking to yourself like that. Or they have a visualize themselves as that 4-year-old, because we can't be that rude to a nasty to a 4-year-old, can we? So they actually have that mental picture. And I'll let you in on something that I do, which is when I'm about to present like a webinar at 5:30 in the afternoon and I'm telling myself that it might be rubbish or that people aren't interested or they won't turn up because there's better things to do. I have pixies on my shoulders, little dancing pixies, and they're the naughty pixies that say bad things to me. So I say to them, get in the jar. You know the M&M's ad, get in the bowl? My pixies have to get in the jar. They can come out and play afterwards. So when we leave and we switch off and I go and prepare dinner, the pixies can come and play then and tell me all the bad things that they want to tell me. But I'm here to serve you right now, so the pixies aren't allowed to dance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's great.
So whatever version of that works for you, it's around, you know, let's quieten down that voice, stop it now, and be attention outwards to the people that you need to be there for. So I'm all about you and what you need to get out of this evening. I can tell myself I've failed later. And the trick is, because I've been in service and focused on you, I won't do that. Great question, Lacey. You'd think I planned it.
Not planned.
Completely. Any last comments? I'm really conscious that we are really over time. Or, you know, what's been the best thing? One word from everyone, and then we can wrap it up. Shana, I can't see your face, so I'm going to ask you.
Oh, mine was absolutely the consciousness of resetting and resetting the thoughts.
Love it. Thank you. And Annalise has put hers in the chat box, and maybe some others have too. The reset, connecting and discussing openly, great conversation, getting away from negative talk, awareness, fabulous. That's great. What a beautiful conversation we've had tonight. I'm so grateful for all of you and what you've brought tonight and the questions that you've asked. It's been wonderful. Alison, I reckon we might be done, and I'm going to hand back to you, and thank you again to La Trobe City for having me and inviting me.
Thank you. This was a session that I was really passionate about to get out there, and so thank you. You've done an amazing job tonight. I think it's been really authentic and everyone's been great in contributing. So thank you, not just to Marie, but for everyone else who is currently here, and for those who have left our webinar already. Thank you for getting involved and being brave and putting your thoughts out there. It's made it run really well tonight, and I'm very appreciative of that. So thank you. As mentioned earlier, we do have another webinar coming up next Tuesday with Dylan from Tower Tax, and that one's looking at new business startups, looking at their business foundations and accounting. So if anyone's interested, if that's something that's of interest to you, please log on to our Eventbrite profile, and the link will be there for registrations. So thank you once again. We appreciate everyone joining us this evening, and we hope to see you at another webinar in the future. Thanks again, Marie.